Let me show you a video that was put out by the Foreign Office of the United Kingdom. This is a real government allegedly run by a conservative party. Check out this video that they put online yesterday.
Climate change is probably the greatest threat we face this century. It's affecting the poorest and most vulnerable countries already in a massive way, but it will affect all of us across the world. We're seeing increasing extreme weather. We're seeing droughts, floods, storms, sea rise, but the most terrifying thing is that the projection of just how much worse this will get if we don't reduce emissions rapidly. The second big worry is the way that all of these impacts will all start to multiply and reinforce each other, and we face huge problems with our food security, with forced migration and with increased conflict, and many other aspects of unmanaged climate change.
There you have it. Theresa May's government says the greatest threat of this century is global warming. It's more than the threat of terrorism or war. And they say this on the eve, they said this on the eve of D-Day. Maybe they think global warming is a worse peril than, of course, the Nazi menace and World War II. I bet they would say they do. Well, my favorite response to this was just 2 letters long. And it came from our friend Patrick Moore, the co-founder of Greenpeace, who has since then gone on to become what he calls the sensible environmentalist. And he says simply, BS. Well, Patrick Moore joins us now via Skype. Welcome back to the program. It's great to see you again. There's 100 things you could say in response to that claim by the UK, but I think BS sums it up with about as much dignity as they deserve. That's my thoughts.
Ezra, these people are living in a complete fantasy world, and the conservatives in Britain have gone bonkers. I mean, they've declared a climate emergency when, are people fleeing from their homes in panic at this present moment? No, there is no climate emergency, and there isn't going to be a climate emergency, but there will be extreme weather, as there always has been since before the time of Christ. So we've been in extreme weather in this world since the beginning of the world. I mean, it was a lot worse back in the days when volcanoes were erupting every 5 minutes, when the Earth was much hotter than it is now. But these people started out with global warming, the idea being that carbon dioxide emissions from fossil fuels would cause the Earth to heat up and make it intolerable for life. Well, that didn't happen. So they changed it to climate change. Now it could be anything: cooling, warming, floods, drought, tornadoes, hurricanes, you name it. But if you said, well, it was awfully cold last winter, they would say, oh no, that's just weather. Don't confuse the climate with weather. What do they talk about now? All they talk about is extreme weather, because they've lost the plot on the whole rest of it. And even the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which is supposed to be the United Nations' foremost body on the whole subject of climate change, says there are no trends in extreme weather, not in hurricanes, not in tornadoes, not in drought, not in floods, to name a few. So if the IPCC says that, and the crazies are just inventing the idea that the extreme weather is getting worse, then they are in their own little fantasy world bubble. There is no actual hard data to indicate that any extreme weather events are increasing. Now it becomes a doomsday prediction. In other words, even if extreme weather isn't increasing now, it most certainly will begin to increase in the future, and it becomes like any other doomsday prediction, unprovable for one thing, because it hasn't happened yet, and more than likely not true, because how many doomsday predictions have actually come true? Yeah. I count 0.
Yeah. Well, there was an implication in that video from the UK that if we make some political choice, the weather will change. It wasn't very practical. In Canada, they're all saying if we had a carbon tax, there wouldn't be forest fires. I think generally politicians don't go full doomsday. They don't make the absolute direct link between if you pay this tax, there will no longer be cold winters, hot summers, hurricanes, tornadoes, forest fires. In Canada, they've been dipping their toe into that, actually implying that if we don't have a carbon tax, we'll have bad weather. If we do have a carbon tax, there won't be bad weather, as if it's an on-off switch. But maybe you can tell me this, Patrick, is there any science from the UN IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that suggests that if we actually do all these policy prescriptions, if we actually do bring in carbon taxes and even ban cars, that's not actually going to change the global climate? I mean, even the activists at the UN don't say put in a tax, change the climate, do they?
Well, yes, they're implying that. They're saying if we quit using fossil fuels, everything will be fine, except for the fact that at least 80% of the global population will be dead. And, you know, it makes me laugh when people say in the States, like when the Green New Deal came out, they said, oh, no, that'll cost 3 million jobs. No, it won't. It'll cost 200 million lives. How do they think they're going to get the food into the cities without trucks? Mm-hmm. And how do they think they're going to grow the food without tractors run on oil? They're going to have battery-powered tractors and battery-powered 40-ton trucks delivering food into the city every day, thousands of trucks, like into New York and Chicago and Los Angeles. How do they think the food gets to the supermarkets? So just that one point, if they stopped fossil fuels today, people would begin to die in the centers of the cities, and it would go outward towards the edge. As people captured any food that was trying to get into the city, they'd kill the people who were bringing the food into the city so they could have the food. I mean, it's very clear. This would be a global catastrophe of absolutely ridiculously stupid proportions, and no one would wish this on the human race. Yeah. It would be a lot better to get 1 degree warmer, I assure you of that. And then the other factor is, if we stopped using fossil fuels overnight, there wouldn't be a tree left on this planet within a few years, because that would be the only fuel left that you could use to heat your home and all the other things we do with energy. It is so ridiculous that it isn't really worth talking about, and we have to ignore these people. Right. We have to ignore these people, and we have to build pipelines, and we have to get the oil from Alberta to eastern Canada, where for some reason up till now they seem to think it's better to bring it from Nigeria, Venezuela, and Saudi Arabia, all with stellar human rights records. You know, I mean, can you believe that they think Alberta oil is somehow worse than oil from those 3 countries? I never heard of anything so crazy. Yeah. And they use the word dirty. Our oil is dirty. Where do they think we grow all our food? In dirt. Mm-hmm. Dirt is dirty. But as in dirty, rotten scoundrel, it's a swear word. Right. So the word dirty is being used not to describe that it's dirty as in dirt on your pants. They're talking about dirty as in dirty, rotten scoundrel. In other words, somehow corrupt or evil, horrible, a word like that. Mm. And so they're just completely confusing everybody by using these words. And now, of course, it's not a climate change anymore. It's a climate crisis. It's a climate catastrophe. It's climate disruption. It's a climate emergency. And it is an existential threat to the existence of mankind. And David Suzuki is talking about human extinction when the population is larger than it ever has been in the history of the human species.
That's an excerpt from the Ezra Levant show. Every day I do a video monologue and then I interview an interesting guest, and then I end by reading my hate mail. But you've got to subscribe to it, which you can do at therebel.media/shows.